Thank you, Joy. It's a pleasure to see you here in Oklahoma City, as well as everybody out there in TV land. This is a topic that is, I started to say, near and dear to my heart. It actually is not near and dear to my heart. It's scary. It's one that I have a lot of interest in. Since I started working at the Poison Center 20 years ago on the night shift, and I heard everything you can imagine. Every night I'd go in and think, I've heard it all. They can't surprise me, and every night they would surprise me. And after 10 years on the night shift, came to the day shift again, continually getting surprised at what people would get into. In 2010, 2011, we got hit by an onslaught of a new type of drugs, actually two classes of drugs that really shocked and kind of terrified me with what our populace are abusing, starting from young adolescents all the way up to older people, my age and older. And I'm talking, of course, about the K2 and spice, the synthetic, some people refer to them as synthetic marijuana, and to a lesser extent, at least in Oklahoma, the bath salts. We're going to talk about both of those. And we're going to talk also about several different types of drugs. Some you may have heard about. Some are oldies but goodies, maybe being abused in different ways or being abused in different formulations that you may not have heard about. So with that, you may have noticed here, Oklahoma Center for Poison and Drug Information. What's that? I've never heard of that facility. We're the old Poison Control Center. That's our new face. Our new name is the Center for Poison and Drug Information. We never really controlled poisons. Nobody ever controlled poisons. We were getting phone calls where people would say, can you come out and pick up this big jar of mercury we found in Grandma's shed, or this big, bag of dangerous pesticide we found? Nah, we don't do that. We provide information. Provide information for educators, school nurses, principals, the counselors. Whatever kind of information you're looking for, be it about medications, poisons, drugs of abuse, environmental stuff. We do that for your group, as well as for medical professionals, for the public. Whoever asks us, we're there to provide that information. So I think this is a much better reflection of what we do. And we realize it's going to take a generation or more, because we've all been raised on the Poison Control Center, but that explains our name change. So with that, let's get rolling. This is what's number one as far as kind of the newer drugs of abuse in Oklahoma. And when I talk about K2 and spice, these are the two drugs that kind of are generically what I'm referring to. These are the ones that are kind of the synthetic marijuana that you might read about in the news or see on the television when the newscasters are talking about it. As you can see, brand names, they are brand names, K2, and they came out with several different versions of it. And spice, there was like Spice Ultra, Spice Platinum, Spice Gold, several different formulations of that. And they became so successful that they just kind of generically became a reference for the whole class of that type of drug. Now that drug, there's lots of different brand names of it, but on the street, it's generally referred to as K2 and spice. So if I slip up and I say K2 and spice, it's because it's a lot easier than saying synthetic cannabinoids, and which is a kind of a pharmacist's way of saying synthetic marijuana. It's not really synthetic marijuana, as we'll see. So what exactly is it? They're drugs that are designed to actually hit the same receptors in the brain, the cannabinoid receptors, that the THC and some of the other components in marijuana activate. So there are actually receptors in the brain that are activated by the chemical compounds that are in marijuana. So these drugs activate those as well, those receptors in the brain. The thing is, they activate them a whole lot harder, a whole lot more effectively than the THC than in marijuana. So I'm not talking about a little bit more effectively. I'm talking about orders of magnitude more. So the effects that we see are not like marijuana. They're a completely different set or a different set of effects that we see. We saw initially the first one that came out was a compound called JW8018, and a lot of these they're referred to as like a they're a kind of a jumble of letters and numbers, and we're going to see where those letters and numbers come from. For those of you who are maybe math or chemistry geeks, there is a quiz at the end of this where I'm going to ask you to draw this chemical compound right here. No, this is actually the chemical structure for JW8018. The JWH actually comes from right here. This gentleman. His name is John W. Huffman, JWH. And he was the guy who invented that first compound, John W. Huffman. It was his 18th try at putting together one of these types of compounds. Here's what he has to say about this class of drugs. It's like Russian roulette to use these drugs. We don't know a darn thing about them for real. So why would he be trying to put together this type of drug? Well, there are constituents or components of marijuana that actually have some beneficial effects. And the example that I use all the time is my wife is a nurse practitioner. She works with pediatric oncology patients, so little kids, even down to infants that have cancer. She had I think a 6-year-old little girl that had severe cancer. She deals with proton therapy up at ProCure, where they actually use a proton beam. But this little girl was on chemotherapy as well. She couldn't eat, absolutely could not eat. So she was completely wasting away. And she called me and she said, "Can we try Marinol on this girl?" Marinol, sound familiar? Marijuana. It's actually is a synthetic kind of derivative of marijuana. I said, yeah, it's not going to hurt her. It's worth a try. Gave her some Marinol. Within a few hours, she was wanting to go to Brahms. She got a large order of fries. She got a large milkshake, and she was pounding them down. She started packing on the weight, and she was actually pretty happy afterwards also. So kind of did something for her affect as well. The thing is that there are legitimate avenues of research for these cannabinoids. And so that's what Dr. Huffman was looking for. He didn't make just one of them, the JW8018. He made an entire series of them. So he published his results in journals. And so the people who are looking for drugs to abuse kind of mined the old journals, the old scientific journals, and said, that looks like it would work. We could abuse that. And these are not stupid people. He basically had provided a roadmap for them to manufacture these drugs. So they started manufacturing them and selling them, and here we go. We've got an entire new class of drugs that people are abusing. So the legislatures caught on pretty quick, started outlawing these classes of drugs. So the people who are making tons of money off of selling these drugs say, hey, we can't let a good thing go away. We're going to start looking at because they've outlawed now all the JWH series of drugs, they start looking for other companies, drug companies, that have done the same type of research. So there are plenty of other companies that have investigated the cannabinoids. They're mining, again, through the old journals. They've got the HU series, the CP series, AM series of drugs. So they start manufacturing and putting out these drugs. And they're not putting them out under, oh, come and try my AM 2201, it's the best. They're putting them out under names like Relaxinol. And if you look at the packaging on a lot of these things, it's no surprise what this stuff is. They've got the little crown leaf of marijuana going around the head. The eyes, instead of circle eyes, it's got little X's over the eyes. They're making no secret as to what they're actually selling. The packaging almost invariably is aimed at teenagers to be very attractive for teenagers. If you'll notice on here, it's probably difficult to see, but it says not for human consumption. Every single package you find of this stuff is going to say that. It also says that it's potpourri, and that actually is that's the way it's sold generally is as incense or potpourri. These people are trying to skirt the law. They're saying, "Hey, we're just selling potpourri for $60 a gram or whatever they're selling it as." That's some expensive potpourri. What people do with it once they get it in their hands, we have no control over that. They're just professing ignorance when they know exactly what it is that they're selling. So what happens, they release these drugs once the legislatures figure out that, okay, there's a new drug in here, we're going to outlaw that. Well, they build up a brand loyalty to say, Relaxinol. Well, they don't want to lose their share of the market, so they'll come up with a new drug and just put it in the same package. And so all of a sudden we got maybe people that are having different adverse effects. We, as toxicologists, all of a sudden are seeing a completely different set of symptoms, same packaging, figure out, hey, we're dealing with a different drug now. So it's constantly chasing after, trying to figure out what's going on with folks. It's a constantly changing landscape as far as toxicity. So now we're on the third generation of drugs. We had the JWH ones, the AM ones. CP was developed by Pfizer, and that research line was abandoned in the 70s and 80s. The RCS ones now apparently are, and that's where most of them are coming out of a single lab in China. And that's where most of these drugs, both the cannabinoids, the K2 and spice drugs, as well as a lot of the bath salts, are coming out of China now. And the WIN series are coming, are drugs that have been developed by Sterling Winthrop. Again, just research drugs, looking for drugs to develop, to profit from. So once the legislature and the law catches up with those drugs, what they'll do is start tinkering with the molecules some more and release some new ones. It's almost impossible to keep up. Although I will say that Oklahoma has done a remarkable job, and I'd say we're probably leaders in the country as far as keeping ahead of the game. The secret, I think, with this, as far as legislating against these drugs, is to not rule out entire classes of drugs that might be good for research or might lead to good drugs for treating patients that actually need it. I mean, just look down the street here from south of the Capitol. We've got a lot of drug companies that are doing research down there. We can't cut off all their avenues of research if that's what they're interested in pursuing. But the legislature has been very good about just targeting specific types of drugs and specific type of substitutions that they could make chemically. And for those of you who aren't chemists, it might be a little bit confusing. They've been remarkably good at doing that, however. So what they do with this, it's actually this stuff that's in the plant material that I showed you on that first slide coming out of those packages. That's not actually the drug. What's the drug is what is kind of sprayed onto it. Okay? When these drugs came out, I would get calls from emergency room physicians that would say, I need to know the toxicity of marshmallow root. And because on the back of it has a list of all these herbs that are supposedly in it. I say, Doc, time out. Okay? It's not marshmallow root toxicity you're dealing with, okay? What they do with this stuff is they take some kind of organic material. For all I know, it could be the lawn clippings from, outside the garage that they're making this stuff with. Do you think they're going to go out and buy actual marshmallow root and strawberry and all this stuff? No, they're buying the cheapest stuff that they can get that will burn when people roll a joint. Then they're spreading it out on a tarp, and they're spraying it with the drug and kind of shaking it up, and then they're packaging it. So they're using a garden sprayer to spray it on whatever will burn that people will smoke. And they package them in these kind of cool Buddha-looking packages, and again, selling it as potpourri. When they came out, these drugs came out, I was really interested in them. I said, I got to know what we're dealing with. And so I called OSBI and I said, guys, I would love to have some of this analyzed. I'm going online. I'm going to buy some. Just want to give you a heads up. I don't want black helicopters landing on my lawn when this stuff shows up in my mailbox. And they said, essentially knock yourselves out. There's nothing that can be, we can't do anything to you because there are no laws against it. These were completely new classes of drugs. It really had never been seen before. So I went online, paid my money, and at the time PayPal hadn't caught on, and so they would accept the money. Found a website, and the company was based in Belize. The money from PayPal went to Belize. The company was based in Amsterdam, and the drugs were shipped to me from Pittsburgh. So it really is a global enterprise for all this stuff. And so I got some of the K2 and spice stuff, as well as some of the bath salts that we're talking about. And I was going to bring them as samplers here for the Oklahoma City crowd, but I figure we might have some law enforcement people here. And so I didn't want to get arrested. Choco, you're coming with me. But, so they stay in the office locked up. Actually, the news people, when they would come out and do stories, they said, can we take these along so we can, do shots for it? And most of the stuff disappeared with the news reporters. But not after I had the stuff analyzed. The interesting thing about all of it is the people who were doing the analysis for it couldn't identify most of it. And again, it was because these things had never been synthesized before. Even, it might have been done in a research lab, but when they analyze this stuff, when they make one of these compounds, it goes into this chemical library that shows all the different wavelengths and all that stuff, and they'll run a chemical through their machine. It's called gas chromatography, mass spectroscopy, GCMS, and once it's almost like a fingerprint, a chemical fingerprint for that drug or that chemical, and they'll get that fingerprint and they'll match it against all the fingerprints of every chemical they've ever run across. Well, it wasn't matching up with anything that they had. So they really couldn't identify these things. They could make some guesses as to kind of what it was, but their libraries contained nothing. So it's really is frightening. The thing is, also with these things, is they don't get tested on humans before they get released to the market. They don't get tested on mice, dogs, cats, goats, sheep, horses, cows. They just get released. And if people like them, they make more of them. If people don't, or if people get injured, they just abandon that. There are plenty more that they can release. So, frustrating stuff. Quality control. I said that they take this stuff and they spray it on there. There's a great poster at one of the meetings that I went to where they took one of these packets and very simple study, they just sampled portions from the same packet. Took some from the right, left, top right corner, top left corner, middle, and different portions of the packet, and looked at the concentrations of the drug within those different portions of the packet. Some of the plant material in there had absolutely no drug on it whatsoever, and other portions of it had astronomical So if you roll the joint from, that really super high concentration, you're getting a dose that is just, crazy amount of drug. And so some people could smoke it and say, hey, it has no effect on me, whereas other people could end up, having seizures, dysrhythmias, all kinds of adverse effects. So, it's all about money. That's what's driving this entire thing, is the people who are in this are in it to make money. Here's what it looks like, essentially just rolling a joint. I had a mom that called me and said, my 14-year-old son he's just been acting very strangely. And we've had him tested for everything. We even had him tested for those synthetic marijuana drugs. Every one of them. I said, really? And we went kind of round and around. I said, because there really aren't tests for everything, simply because, you can't test for all of them, because tests haven't been developed for everything. And she said, the only odd thing that I can pin as far as his behavior is that he's now keeping a bowl of potpourri in his room. Now, come on. What 14-year-old boy is keeping a bowl of potpourri in his room? He was smoking that stuff. And I couldn't convince her, just could not convince her. Denial is very strong with parents on this stuff. We're going to look at some of the packaging as well. A lot of it is packaged to deceive parents. So with some of the newer ones, when these drugs first came out, they were not hitting the receptors, those cannabinoid receptors in the brain, quite as hard. So our former educator at the Poison Center was a paramedic. She said, oh yeah, we'd go out on runs, and a parent would be concerned about their teenager who'd been smoking this stuff. And we'd get out there, and they'd be mellow. They'd want us to take them to Taco Bell. They were just really chilled out, kind of, like somebody that's been smoking marijuana. She said, now I am terrified to go on one of these runs. She's a little thing, probably 5 feet tall, 110 pounds, and she said, I'm going to get hurt one day going on one of these runs, because people are just completely out of control. And the important thing is that if somebody is on either the bath salts or these synthetic cannabinoids, you have to protect yourself. One person is not going to be able to restrain them. Let the professionals handle it. Multiple people, law enforcement, people who are trained to do it. Don't get yourself hurt in the process, I think, is probably going to be my biggest caution with these folks that are under the influence. Even sedating these people medically, normally we would give Ativan, Valium, that class of drugs. We call them benzodiazepines for sedation. Doesn't touch these folks at all. Paramedics can give everything that they have on their truck, and doesn't make a dent in them. They are still hallucinating and aggressive and violent. So they've had to go to very much stronger antipsychotic type medications to get some of these people under control. So who knows? How's this going to evolve? We really don't know. They act on the same receptors. They don't look the same chemically. And when we do a drug test for drugs, we're looking for something that looks chemically similar. So what happens? They don't show up on a urine drug screen. Like a little dipstick that you put in there. These are really popular in schools where they do drug tests. Private schools. I've talked to like some of the Catholic schools where they do frequent urine drug tests. The military. That's where we first started seeing these drugs. Is out at Tinker. The use was huge. They probably have the most sophisticated drug tests for these synthetic cannabinoids, and even then, there are some of the users are slipping through the cracks because of the constantly evolving compounds that are being abused. So they have to move on to that GCMS, and it's simply not practical. It's way too expensive to test every sample by that. So it's really is a difficult situation. So that's kind of it on the K2 and spice and synthetic cannabinoids. With that, we move on to the bath salts. Does anybody know why I picked that picture? Actually, I didn't pick that picture. I had a student said, find me a picture where somebody's eating somebody's face off. Remember that guy in Miami that was going naked down the highway and chewing some guy's face off? This happened like a year ago. And this story came out in the news, and they said, you know what? We think he was just psychotic. We couldn't find any drugs in his system. We couldn't identify any drugs in his system. I bet he was under the influence of these bath salts. The problem is they just didn't know what to test for. So that's my segue into the bath salts. I love those pictures, by the way. The little guy eating his snout. So, I am ashamed to admit I got the first call in Oklahoma on bath salts. I said, somebody called me, and this was early 2010, and I was on the phones, taking a break from all the spreadsheets and grant writing and all that stuff that managing directors do, because I love being on the phone. And some guy said, what's this I hear about kids abusing bath salts and getting high from them? And I said, are you kidding? You can't abuse bath salts. Urban legend. Next. And what happens 3 months later? Bath salts kind of explode onto the scene. These truly are drugs. They are designed to stimulate. They are designed as drugs. I thought he was talking about the stuff that sits on my grandma's. Yeah, Epsom salts. The stuff you get from Bath and Body Works. I thought he was talking about kids that are snorting Epsom salts. No. Same thing as potpourri. This was just a way to try and get around the law. We're selling you a little packet of bath salts. Soothing bath salts. Dissolve it in water and soak your feet. Either that or snort it up your nose. So that's the way they were being sold. Just a nickname for them, folks. They are strictly drugs, strictly being used to be abused. So, along with the agitation, increased heart rate, really bad elevation in temperature, seizures, have muscle breakdown because people get real agitated, they're fighting. As the muscles break down, the myoglobin, which is one of the breakdown products from muscles, clog up the kidneys, so people develop kidney failure. As bad as it makes people feel, and it does make people feel bad, I'm going to give you a website at the end of this lecture where you can go and learn about new drugs as they're coming out. But very, very experienced drug users report that, you know what, I really don't care for the feeling that this drug gives me, but I can't stop taking it, even after one or two uses. You know, we told our kids, you smoke marijuana one time and you'll be hooked for life. These drugs can do it. One use. And in particular, I read one where the guy was begging, borrowing, and stealing, selling everything he had, went on like a 9-day bender with one of these type of bath salt drugs. And part of the problem is coming down off of them is so uncomfortable that they have to stay on the high to avoid the very unpleasant sensations coming down off of them. So it's extraordinary. In reading some of the descriptions of the trips that people are on when they take these is kind of fascinating. It's like kind of watching a train wreck in slow motion. So, and I'll have more to say about that when we talk about the website. So, how else are they marketed? Like I said, the bath salts is just a sham. It's just a cover to try and get around the law. Again, I promise, officer, I didn't know that they were going to snort that. I sold it as a foot soak for them, essentially. So insect repellents, the stuff that I ended up buying and have on display in my office was sold as a plant food. Supposedly you dissolve it in water and water your banana tree with it. They're little tablets that actually were intended to be crushed and snorted. And they were the most ugly tablets you've ever seen. You know, my pharmaceutics professor in school, I would have gotten an F on him. You know, because that was, we had to learn how to make tablets from scratch, and I would have got an F on these things. Plant food, I think I mentioned toilet bowl deodorizer. I've got a picture of the iPhone scratch remover. Here's an example of the insect repellent. It does have a 6-month guarantee, so that's good. You can always get your money back, I'm sure. White lightning. This is the one. Look at this. You know, if I walked into my kid's room and I saw this stuff, apply to the cellular phone display, polish scratched areas for 2 to 3 minutes, I would be so proud of her. That she was taking care of that expensive phone that I bought her. Keep out of the reach of children. I mean, it really is. It's meant to deceive 100%. That one, I think, I actually am giving this talk to several EMS agencies, and it's a repeat. One of the person who set it up has seen this previously, and she said, I was showing this to one of my students, and I pulled this up online, the Moby Shine, and my student is an older gentleman, and when I showed this to him, his face just turned white, and he sat down. And he had been looking through the history on the internet, and his kid had bought some of this. And you know, my heart went out to him. What do you do? At least now he knows. Kind of sad. So on these websites where you purchase it, almost invariably they have a discussion board. Okay, so a forum where people can talk about the different drugs and the effects that they have. And they talk in code, all right? So here's this guy talking about the Moby Shine. Cleaned my screen last night. The last bit of polishing I did was at 8 p.m. However, it kept cleaning until 5 a.m. So what's he saying? The duration of action of the drug was 9 hours. I think I overdid it, so use sparingly. It's very strong. And I really don't get this last bit. Cleaned my whole basement. I have a guess. My guess is that all these drugs, well, most of them, have a stimulant component to them. And that the Moby Shine is almost a pure stimulant. Early in their use, meth addicts have some of the cleanest houses you'll ever see because they've got all this, they've got to do something. And a lot of times, they're cleaning house. I mean, it just drives them crazy. They're moving around. So that's my guess as to what he's saying. He didn't rate it. So I would like to see what he would have rated it. He didn't give it on the star system they've got there. But people are very frank about their ratings on these drugs. What's that?
It's called very stimulating.
Yeah. There you go. This one I'm not buying. Can you imagine finding your son or daughter with Molly's Love Ultra toilet deodorizer in their room? That one's not very... There's also Charlie Sheen bath salts I saw. It has a caricature of Charlie Sheen on them. And a lot of them now are getting... I mean, they have... Some of the stuff I got was like Atomic Bomb and... You know, of course, I went for the poison-related ones and stuff like that, but they're just, like I said, meant to appeal to teenagers. It's pretty obvious. On the Moby Shine, with the directors, both poison centers typically have a managing director who's a pharmacist like myself, and a medical director. This gentleman in Chicago is medical director. We have a mailing list. Or a listserv, and we help each other with cases. So here he puts one out. Hi, we have a case of ingestion of Mobi-Shine scratch remover, intractable seizures for several hours. So imagine the damage that's being done both to the brain and to the body on this patient. They've been hitting him with everything that they could think of as far as drugs to try and control these seizures. Does anyone have any experience? Anyone know what's in it? So we had people from all over the country and actually all over the world were chiming in on how to deal with it. Eventually, after another couple hours, he managed to get the seizures under control with all the, you had some of the best minds in the world in toxicology were weighing in on this kid. Turns out, once they were able to get the seizures under control, they started going through his pockets. They found the invoice for the stuff and the package. He had snorted the entire package of that stuff. He had no idea how to use it, and so he just snorted the whole package. Figured that's how you did it. So again, there's a naivete as well as, it was a sad situation. So the kid probably did some permanent damage to his brain as well as to his body. This is the one. That was the first one that came out, the ivory wave bath salts, and that's where it got the name, bath salts. Typically snorted, but they can be smoked, swallowed, injected. So where do they come from? There are several different formulations. The way I describe it, the bath salts is not just one class of drug or one type of drug. They go on a continuum from pure stimulants, you think methamphetamine and cocaine, all the way to pure hallucinogens. When you think about LSD. So, and with maybe ecstasy, that's both a stimulant and a hallucinogen, kind of in the middle, they cover the entire gamut. So, the most popular ones, the ones that started out, are these ones that are derived from the cot plant. So it's kind of a stimulant like we would use coffee in the morning. They use the leaves of the cot plant in the Horn of Africa, the Arabian Peninsula. They'll chew some of the leaves and kind of get just a little bit of a boost. The active ingredient, or what gives them that boost, is a chemical called cathinone. And so the people who think up such things think, okay, we'll take that cathinone and we are going to make super cathinone, and then just start tinkering with it chemically, and just that was the birth of these bath salts. So, and again, the people are not stupid that are making these things. Some of the forums that I kind of lurk on are, it's obvious that they're populated by PhDs that have labs in their homes, and their goal is to make their fortune coming up with the next big drug. And they are thinking about how drugs are acting at a receptor level in the brain, and they're sharing their information. I just kind of sit back and watch, and kind of trying to anticipate what's going to come up in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. And they are working diligently at coming up with it. Anybody remember in, where was that? Kanawha, there was some kids that died from bath salts. It was a couple years ago. This is a couple clips from the 911 call that came in.
Taking advantage of Corcoran.
911.
Hey, my friend is having a seizure.
Where are you at?
I'm not sure what the address is. I don't live here. She was spitting up blood.
She's
I think she's coming through a little bit.
You think she's what?
I think she's coming through a little bit.
Okay. And how old is she?
I think she's 20.
Is that her yelling in the background? Is that her yelling in the background?
Yeah.
Okay, what is she yelling about?
No, that's not her. That's a different person.
911 address of the emergency.
Yes, I just called a few minutes ago.
Yes.
My friend has had another seizure. Yeah, she's really hot. She's burning up.
So when they brought her in, her temperature was 109. She didn't make it. Two others didn't make it. What they had done is purchased a drug online, and they didn't purchase a drug. They didn't purchase bath salts. What they purchased was a research chemical, and that's the way a lot of these are sold as well, for people doing research at home. And it was this guy that on the phone that had purchased it. He was working. He left the drug at a party, and they didn't know how to take it. They just mixed it up with some water. We're selling it for like $5 a teaspoon or something, and 3 of them ended up dying. The guy that purchased it ended up pleading to some degree of murder, I believe, and is in prison now. So that was really bad news. I talked to the paramedics who had run on the case. Again, same thing like I've talked about. They could absolutely do nothing to control the seizures or the temperature. I was talking out in Shawnee to a parents group and was just getting ready to play this, and something told me, don't do it. So this is not a good idea. Turned out the mother of the girl was in the audience. She came up to me afterwards and thanked me for doing the talk, but I'm so glad I didn't play the 911 call. It was a tragic thing. And when the call came to us, part of the thing is they had told us when we got the call from the emergency department, they said liquid ecstasy, and then it was liquid 2CE, and then it was liquid this and liquid that, and they had no idea what they had purchased. Finally, they decided it was 2CE. Remember the jumble of letters and numbers? No, that wasn't it. It was a drug called bromo dragonfly. That's the street name for it. And the reason they call it bromo dragonfly, and the reason I put this structure on here, is because these people are advanced enough to know what the structure is. It looks like a dragonfly with the bromine molecule at the front. Somebody looked at it and said, hey, bromo dragonfly. That's the nickname that it got. It's a stimulant drug, and I guess they were out of 2CE. They just put this other drug in the package and shipped it to the kid. Not that he knew how he was planning on using it anyway, but they just substituted whatever they had on hand. Again, ordered from, that came in from out of the country, I believe, from China. So what happened? Congress gets wind of it, President gets a hold of it, signs a bill saying several of these drugs are outlawed on a federal level. Bam. All kinds of new drugs get released immediately. They've got drugs waiting in the pipeline for states to outlaw them. So our legislature takes action, they release them. So there are other drugs that are advertised online. Phenazepam. Does anybody know drugs at all? Diazepam, temazepam, benzodiazepines like Valium, Xanax, Adderall. That's just a different spelling. That's a brand name. Oxycontin. I don't know what's in those second two. I sure would like to know. Xanny bars. We did a story with Channel 25 where one of the reporters came up to me and she said, I want to do a sting at one of these head shops where they sell smoking supplies. And she said, would you analyze have analyzed what I get? I said, sure. It sounds like fun. And so she goes in with these little button mic, and she goes in and she looks around. She goes, I want to buy some pills. And the guy goes, and she's this tiny little cute thing. She's since moved on to Florida. And the guy, what kind of pills do you want? And she goes, I just want to chill out. And he reaches under the counter and he pulls out some Xanny bars. You know, these look just like a Xanax 2 milligram tablet. Okay? And so she brought them to me, and I had them analyzed, and it was phenazepam, 2 milligrams, a drug, a benzodiazepine drug that was developed in Russia, and at the time there were no federal laws essentially against it. It was a lot stronger than anything that was on the United States market. It lasted a lot longer. So, I mean, I guess they could have been prosecuted for selling a drug of abuse and I guess marketing it as such, but it would have been a very difficult prosecution, I think. I'm not an attorney, but and I've testified in cases where people have had to, where they've had to or attempted to prosecute these things and have been successful, but it's been for dealers who are selling huge quantities. They don't go after the small people because it's very difficult to do so. And actually found some of those for sale on eBay as well. So fairly easy to get a hold of. And I love it. Blue Lotus extract. It's kind of a homeopathic thing. No, it's a drug. Xanny air freshener. It's a spiritual spray. Spray 3 to 4 sprays in the area intended to freshen. Do not refreshen for 48 hours. It is strong and has a long-lasting freshness. So I figured, I had a friend who, a lot of these drugs originally came up from Louisiana. He got some of this, had it analyzed. It was phenazepam as well. And so I was jealous. I have a wall of shame in my office with ill-considered products. So I've got the original Four Loko, a couple of cans of that, and cocaine energy drink, and B to the E, which was Budweiser with guarana, the caffeinated Budweiser. And Bucky balls, the little magnets that were hurting kids. I wanted some Xanny air freshener, so I ordered it, and never arrived. So I got burned on that. I figured also, if they were having a 2-for-1 deal, I could display some, and if things, I started to have a revolt against me in the poison center, I could just walk out of my crowd and start spraying that around. Everybody's just going to chill out. Revolt quashed. But this actually is the way it's intended to be. It's a metered dose inhaler, or a metered dose sublingual spray for this benzodiazepine. They show you on the website how to use it. I was telling you about buying that stuff online. I forgot to tell you the most important thing. I had that stuff delivered to my fiance's house because even though they assured me I wouldn't get in trouble, I went the extra mile. She is so great. She let me do that. And now she puts up with my crap doing stuff like I'm sorry. Puts up with my antics doing stuff like that. But when I got burned on the Xanny air freshener, she said, "That's it. No more throwing away money on this stuff." And I can't spend state money getting this stuff and having it analyzed. So, it would be hard to justify a P-card purchase of stuff from Belize. So. Here's the other. This is one of the ones I had on that list. Oxycontin and Vicodin. What do you think these are trying to mimic? Obviously, Vicodin and Oxycontin. I'd love to know what's in these. If my wife would let me buy some, she won't. But look at how they're marketed. Oxycontin. It's from Dr. Feelgood. Again, they're marketing these towards kids. Take at least once daily to look cool and make your friends super jealous. For best results, take with friends. Do not drive after consuming. Your car may start to fly. Just saying. think about what a 14 or 15-year-old, how appealing that would be to a 14 or 15-year-old kid. I mean, that's almost criminal. I suspect that there's an extract of I'm just blanking out now. I want to say we're going to talk about it. Kratom in there. And we'll talk about Kratom here in a minute. We're going to 3:30, maybe wind up a little bit earlier. Is that right? Or does it end at 2:30?
3:30.
3:30? Okay.
1:30 to 3:30.
Okay. I don't...
As long as you want it.
As long as I want to go? Okay, we can wind it up. I could talk about this all day. That's really, I do have my interest in drug abuse. I'm an evangelist. I want everybody to know what's going on. So, what effects do these have in common? Agitated delirium. That's kind of the medical term for it. But here I've got an example of it. If I can get this going. That actual clip is over 10 minutes long. This happened in Oklahoma.
I need an officer. I need an officer.
You got ambulances right over there, man.
Just jumped over the counter and grabbed a big spatula. I think that was a knife. How many of you would have been in the Whataburger there with him still? Not me. Not me. I would have been gone. But those are the effects of both of these types of drugs. When I said it, people just are out of control. That's and how people can get hurt. Can you imagine running on these folks? Have you run on these people?
Yeah.
That's fairly typical, is it not?
Crazy. Yeah, there was one recently that he just took off all his clothes and was just after it.
And the reason they took off their clothes is their body temperature has gone up. Yeah. So I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. You've seen this multiple times, yeah. So, we try and do the best we can as far as minimizing stimulation. The last thing you want to do is make loud noises, flashing lights around these folks, because it's going to flip them out even more. The effects are very prolonged, up to 48 hours, some of them 72 hours before they start to come down off of them. And the pattern of how these drugs kind of go through the United States is really interesting. Traditionally, we have always thought about drugs coming to Oklahoma from the East Coast and the West Coast and kind of moving in. 2010 and 2011, these drugs start coming up through the Gulf. So start out in Louisiana. I'm good friends with the director of the Louisiana Poison Center, and he's the expert on these things. And so I'd call him if we saw something new and go, oh yeah, we saw that 9 months ago. And now we're having kind of a resurgence, and the kind of the nexus seems to be Mississippi. Mississippi has had 10 times as many since the beginning of the year as the rest of the country. So I think that's going to be kind of the start, and I anticipate that we're just going to see a huge spike in them, and probably in the next 6 months as things expand out from there. They tend to go in waves. It's just been a really odd pattern, and kind of along the Gulf Coast, Florida, and then kind of northern Atlantic coast is where we're seeing these this time. So where did they get them? Internet, just like I did. Also mom and pop grocery stores. At one time, very early on, you could see them maybe in a 7-Eleven in some of the chain stores. Not anymore. They figured out real quick that they were drugs. Some mom and pops still have no idea what they are. They just know that they make a nice margin on them, and they have no idea what they're selling. And others are completely aware of what they're selling and are making an absolute fortune on them. So, what are you going to do? Those are the ones that are getting prosecuted. So, like I said, they try and keep up with the laws. They pump them out as the new laws are made. They put out the new drugs that are, if not compliant with the new laws, they skirt the new laws as they're put out, and rinse and repeat over and over again. This is the company I bought these from, and what's interesting is if you look here, it says legal products available for each state. Well, I checked this website just the other day, and they're behind. They haven't caught up with Oklahoma law. But a big reason for that is they really don't care anymore. Their shipping facility is now in the European Union, and that's as close as they'll tell you. They used to be shipping out of the United States. Now they're shipping out of the EU. And so they don't really care about stuff getting caught in customs or whether it even gets to you or not. They've got your money. So we've got here the stuff being sold as research chemicals. You can, and these are all, this N-bomb series right here is getting some real popularity right now. And I have this on here just to show, they'll show you the chemical structures, they'll show you the extended chemical name, the molar mass, the molecular mass, I mean just all kinds of stuff about them. Again, they know exactly what they're selling. And if you don't see what you want on a lot of these companies, they'll make it for you. If you can imagine it, they will make it for you. Build it and they will come, right? Or they'll provide you with the chemical pathways. They'll say, start out with these chemicals, put them together this way, do this to it. They'll provide you custom synthesis. So I like this. Forget about wasting time and money attempting to make your own. You can now invite our pharmacists to implement their knowledge and skills in creating optimized compounds and intermediates. So after retirement, I may have a gig in China. It's shocking to me. Just horrible. Anybody heard of crocodile? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. It's bottom line, it's not here. It got a lot of airplay for a while though. In the Russia, it's a substitute for heroin. So we're going to move on past the bath salts and the K2 and spice. Crocodile. Media went nuts over it. Heroin substitute, basically it's cooked inside the house. You start out with some codeine tablets, some gasoline, some iodine, some phosphorus. Cook it up in your kitchen, inject it, get high for a few hours, and then pretty soon your skin rots and falls off. Okay? And good times, yeah. So here's a crocodile house in Russia. Really, really popular in Russia. And it's kind of devastated a generation of people. So here they're making it under sterile conditions, you can see. Using the matchbook covers to scrape it all together and injecting it under sterile conditions, as you can see. Kind of feels like heroin when they inject it. Where they inject it starts getting gangrene, and the skin just sloughs away. And it doesn't slough away a little bit; it sloughs away to the bone. So, I mean, I had trouble finding a. This is the least offensive picture of crocodile that I could find. If you go look for it under that spelling and do a Google image search, I have nightmares about it. There's a picture of a woman holding her hand up, and it's this gleaming bone. You know, they're two. So the deal is, I mean, we thought we had a couple cases here in Oklahoma. They said, "Oh yeah, these people have been using crocodile meth." Well, you know what? They were having skin necrosis, and their skin was kind of being eaten away. And then there was another hospital in another state said, "Oh yeah, we got crocodile here." And then in a journal, somebody comes out and says, "We have the first case of crocodile in the United States." But you know what? Nobody actually identified desomorphine as being present, chemically identified it. It turns out that all the cases that kind of looked like it probably were just severe staph infections. Staph infections are horrific. The skin will start sloughing just like that. And intravenous drug abusers are really, really prone to these to these staph infections. And we started thinking about it, and we thought, why wouldn't we have crocodile in the United States? Anybody have any ideas?
It's too easy to get the other stuff. Why bother?
Bingo. That's number one. It's too easy to get other stuff, the good stuff. And number two, codeine isn't over the counter here. In Russia, codeine was, up until a few months ago, over the counter. They could buy all the codeine, that they wanted to make this desomorphine. So we probably never had crocodile here. I feel pretty confident we didn't. So why is it popular in the U.S.? Thank you. Perfect answer. We've got plenty of Vicodin and Lortab, all kinds of stuff. We as Oklahomans love our opioids. It kills a lot of us too. A lot. It's one of the things I do. Unfortunately, in my position, is I review all the fatalities, all the autopsy reports from the medical examiner's office, and there are a lot to read. There's at least 2 or 3 a day of drug overdose deaths. So, the vast majority of those are opioid deaths, and the vast majority of those are people who are just found at home, dead. You know, they're not trying to commit suicide. They were abusing prescription medication, and they just went a little bit too far. Just took one extra tablet too much, and fell asleep and never woke up. Number 6 in the nation as far as drug overdose deaths, and that's actually come down a little bit. We were number 1 for a while. Like I said, the overwhelming majority due to prescription painkillers. We use them a lot of different ways. Mainly swallowing. You can. It's real popular to crush and snort them. The extended release formulations like OxyContin have really gone out of their way to make it difficult to crush them and snort them. Or some people will try and crush them and dissolve the tablets and then inject that solution. But it just takes a day or two for people to figure out, once a new formulation is released, how to break that or how to get past it. Because, believe me, they really want to be able to figure out how to inject it. The desire is there to inject drugs just like you would heroin. So when a new formulation is released, I am watching those websites, and there was one, I don't remember what it was, Opana, I think, and the company said, "Oh, they'll never be able to get rid of this. If you try and crush it, it just makes a gummy mess." Well, within 3 days, somebody said, "Solved it." You know what they did? They just threw it in water and let it dissolve. Didn't touch it, and it all, the drug dissolved down into the water. They could just withdraw it, and basically they did nothing to it other than throw it in water. Cold water extraction, they called it. So it was actually easier than most anything else that they. And so the people who are intent on abusing drugs are very, very crafty, and they always stay one step ahead. So what are we doing about opioid abuse? Oklahoma is pretty serious about trying to combat it, trying to bring down that death rate. Last year, I think it was 2013, we had 813 deaths, and I believe it was over 900 last year, drug overdose deaths. You got the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services has a huge amount of outreach, as is the Department of Mental Health. Law enforcement is working on several fronts as far as trying to cut off supply of drugs on the streets, as well as these naloxone kits. Are you guys training with naloxone, or were they talking about bringing it to you?
They haven't said anything yet, so.
I think they're training primarily and have started in the Tulsa area and kind of working this way. These naloxone kits are pretty cool. Naloxone is an antidote for an opioid overdose. So if somebody stops breathing, that's what kills people with an opioid overdose, is essentially the brain just forgets to breathe. They can be brought back, their breathing can be restarted by a dose of this naloxone. Well, it's kind of difficult to get yourself to inject somebody, which is the way it's typically given. Although some states, these kits do come with needles, and you jab somebody in the thigh with it. But Oklahoma is kind of elected to go with these nasal spray. So these little kits, just have them, put this little syringe together that doesn't have a needle on it, just put on this little nasal sprayer and spray it up their nostrils. And the effect is almost immediate. Bam, they just wake up. Yes?
What age group are most of those deaths, or is there a particular concentration of ages?
My gut feeling is middle age, maybe 20 to 40, 45 males. I couldn't tell you for sure, but that's kind of my gut feeling, just from all the ones that I've reviewed. But the goal with these naloxone kits is for law enforcement, first responders. Paramedics already can give it, and they carry it on their rigs, but EMTs can carry it. Family members, just interested, people who, might have friends that they know abuse drugs, to have one of these kits available to them. And the governor has signed legislation that, that this will be available. The problem is that initiating this, it's a huge rollout. So the Department of Mental Health is kind of taking it step by step and getting this rolled out. One of the nice things about it is that if somebody is down for a reason other than opioid overdose, and you give this to them, it's not going to hurt them. You just can't hurt them with this. Now, if somebody is opioid addicted and you give them a full dose of this, you're going to have an angry person, because they're going to be in withdrawal just like that. And you've taken away their high, and they're going to be mad at you, but they're not going to be dead. So there's good and bad. They're going to be very uncomfortable, but the opioid withdrawal doesn't kill people. So what happens when you got all kinds of people that want opioids? The supply is starting to kind of dry up because law enforcement is cutting down on supply. Pharmacies are starting to look at where stuff is, how many people are picking it up. prescribers are starting to look at, oh, you just got a prescription over here from Dr. So-and-so. So supply is drying up a little bit. Law of supply and demand. Simple economics. The price of a Lortab or a Vicodin starts going up, right? All of a sudden people can't afford it enough to keep their habit going. What do they turn to? Heroin. Exactly. Heroin. We're seeing a dramatic rise in heroin. That's why those EMTs want me to come and talk to them. Is because they are seeing a huge rise in heroin use. And the heroin purveyors in the state they got a great business plan, folks. I mean, they are organized. And they're just not based here. They're based countrywide. So they have basically roving groups of salespeople that stay in one city for maybe a month. So they don't really get known to law enforcement, move on to the next city. And they have cell phones that might have an Oklahoma area code. You call and say, I need this. You're not talking to somebody that's actually in Oklahoma. You're talking to somebody in Los Angeles or Boston. They just got a cell phone with an Oklahoma number. They'll call back to their buddy in Oklahoma and say, meet him here. So it's incredibly well designed to evade the law, and heroin use is really increased dramatically. So with that, we're going to see probably an increase in disease. In Illinois, there's a county that has seen astronomical rise in HIV and hepatitis C. They averaged up until I think 2 months ago 2 cases of HIV per month, and I think in 1 month they had over 150 cases of HIV and hepatitis C. So it's possible that can happen, at any time. I'm not saying it'll happen here, but it's possible when people are sharing needles. Moving on to another one. Blonde honey oil. The news did something on this not too long ago, or some people call it DABs or BHO, where they extract the resin from marijuana. So you're not carrying around a bunch of pot. You're just carrying the psychoactive ingredient, the resin from it. Tiny little amount. But you still got the stuff that gets you high. So you can use it in a vape device. It doesn't smell like the burning marijuana does. So you can buy the little thing to make it on eBay. $35. Let's see. He sold 8 of them here. He's got plenty of them to sell still, so I don't have to worry about it. So it's a Pyrex device. They'll put down here at the bottom some cheesecloth and put it on there with a clamp to keep the marijuana, and that's a lot of marijuana. And at the top there's a little hole where they'll put the tip of a butane canister in. And I'll show you a video of it, how they make it. But remember this, butane, if you have a big butane canister and you keep it upright and press down the top, the butane's going to come out as a gas, okay? If you turn it upside down and press it, the butane's going to come out as a liquid. So they have it upside down, let it come down as a liquid. That liquid flows through the marijuana, and as it flows through, it dissolves that resin that contains the THC, and it runs out into a bowl and then evaporates and leaves behind that resin. Brilliant. These are the big things of butane that they use. So here's a BHO extraction. This went over 3 hours. This guy started out with a trash bag full of marijuana. So there he is. He's already been through a bunch of these canisters, packing the device, the Pyrex tube. You notice he has like a little silicone sleeve that he's holding on to it. It's because it's really incredibly cold coming through. You could get frostbite holding on to it. And if you'll also notice, what does he have that sitting on? The bowl. It's a hot plate. So he is not the brightest bulb. And why? Because butane is flammable. So he's just trying to accelerate. The stuff would eventually come off on its own, evaporate off on its own. So as that evaporates, this is what he comes up with. The dabs, the blonde honey oil. And then they can use that in their little vape device. That one's actually probably for liquid. Or the little vaporizer or the nebulizer one that fools the school teachers or the parents. Again, very clever people at hiding things. I thought I had a picture on here. Where I learned about that method of extracting that resin was from a firefighter who had fought a house fire that was generated because the guy had done something like 150 canisters of that. So the entire house fills up with butane, reaches the pilot light for the furnace, and the whole house went up. So it's not unusual for that to happen. So, but I have a picture where that happened, from the outside where that happened. You see the canisters all over the place and the melted siding. And there's actually video that I had at one time. I don't know where it went, where it got to, because my hard drive is a mess. But security video of a house going up from the same thing happening. I won't spend a whole lot of time on desmethylfentanyl. We haven't seen any in our area, but this came out of Canada. They were developing this and shipping it into the United States. We do see fentanyl abuse, quite a bit of fentanyl abuse. And where I see this is fentanyl patches. I see this in those death reports where people are found with fentanyl patches in their mouth. They will suck on used fentanyl patches because there's still a lot of fentanyl even after people take them off those patches, and they'll go fishing around in the trash, tuck it inside their mouth. It's not absorbed if you swallow it, but it's absorbed really well across the cheeks. So these folks would make the desmethylfentanyl, smuggle it in the United States. I put this in here because now these would have got me an A in pharmaceutics. Look, you got your Facebook tablets. You got your Tim Hortons Donuts tablets. These would pass, more than, here's a teddy bear tablet. I hadn't noticed that one before. If you saw some of these on the street and they were just, they were marked like a acetaminophen tablet or something like that, they might fool you. These are pretty good. But these tablets wouldn't, if you swallowed them with this desmethylfentanyl, it wouldn't really have the opioid effect. But if you put them under your tongue or just sucked on them, like people use nicotine lozenges, then you get the effect. Molly. Anybody heard about Molly? Okay. What they say is, it's pure ecstasy. It's pure MDMA. Not really. Not really. What it is, it's a marketing ploy. Pure Molly would be fairly expensive to develop and get out there. It's a marketing ploy to get some of these bath salts out there. So, bath salts are cheap. Ecstasy is fairly expensive. So, in New York, these people, over the past 4 years, only 13% of it was actually MDMA or ecstasy. Most of it was bath salts. So, they typically will either inject it, swallow it, like I said, just a marketing ploy. Lean. Has anybody heard of lean? Also goes by Texas tea or scissor. Anybody know why they call it lean? Because it makes you lean. Lean, sometimes far enough to fall over. Drives me crazy. It's start out with promethazine with codeine syrup. My wife last winter had a really bad cough and cold. She got a prescription for Phenergan with codeine syrup. I can't tell you how many pharmacies I went to try and get her cough syrup, and nobody had it. It was all sold out. I like to tell myself that it was due to everybody. There was a really bad cold going through the city. I think probably a lot of people were using lean. Purple Drank is another name for it. But if you go online and look for Purple Drank or lean recipes, they'll tell you how to make it. You start with this cough syrup. You put some Sprite in there, so you got kind of a little bit more palatable. Put some Jolly Ranchers in there, dissolve that a little bit, so you get a really sweet, carbonated beverage that you just chug down. And so you have codeine, the opioid effects from the Phenergan. You get kind of antihistamine effects that will make you kind of loopy and hallucinate. And some people find that pleasurable. So they give you you need to start out with prescription grade cough syrup. The most important ingredient must contain promethazine and codeine. So it tells you how to make it. So that actually is fairly popular with teenagers, kids. Started out in Texas. We started seeing it. Anybody heard about smoking alcohol? The news did something on this. When I first heard about this, I rushed out to get one of these devices. I heard about this device called a Vaportini. Saw it on the internet. And I said, I've got to get one of those for my wall of shame. Actually, I bought two of them. One to put on my wall of shame and another one to take out and show everybody. And what it was just like a glass globe. You provide your own pint glass. There's a little metal ring that goes over it. Put a candle down inside the pint glass. You put your little ring on top of that. Put this glass globe on the top. It has a tiny little hole in it with a little funnel. You put a liqueur, some whiskey, something like that inside the globe. And as the heat from the candle goes up, it vaporizes the alcohol inside there. And you put this little straw in there and just inhale the fumes from the alcohol fumes. Okay? So what happens as you inhale those fumes, the thought is that you get drunk, and you would. It goes into the lungs. The lungs are very, very well saturated with blood supply. As stuff goes into the lungs, it doesn't hit the liver on the way to the brain. So you're going to get a higher blood level and more rapid effect of the alcohol, and the liver doesn't get a chance to detoxify it before it hits the brain. So it's a brilliant way of doing it. Plus, the other thought is that you're not going to get nearly as much calories from the alcohol, because you're going to get drunk with much less alcohol. So both of those ended up being broken because they were fairly fragile. One of them was broken by a well-meaning EMT, the other one by one of my staff members, just kind of playing with them and dropped them, and no more for me. You'd think I'd learned my lesson buying stuff, right? This is a picture of the Vaportini. So here's the little metal ring. There's the candle down there, the pint glass. And so that got some play. And that was about a year ago it was really popular. But it was quickly supplanted by a couple of other methods of smoking alcohol. It's not really smoking alcohol. It's a way of inhaling alcohol vapors. This guy is doing one, kind of a pressure method. Again, brilliant Physics is your friend. You got a video of that one. This one's ripped off YouTube. Plenty of pictures of that. Here we go. I'll try this again. I want to turn this one up a bit because he's got a, I think, Irish accent, and it's kind of tough to make it out. So he's got a cork.
Right, basically, put a cork in the bowl. With a bit of
2 liter
whiskey,
bottle.
whatever you like, you know. Crank that up. Cover it, 30 psi.
Bicycle pump.
Release it. Like that.
Alcohol vapor.
Just hold it. Don't drop it.
Fun with physics. Just the pressure changes enough to take that from a liquid form to a gaseous form, because the vapor pressure is going to leave the water in there behind. The alcohol is going to come off into that vapor form. You just suck it into your lungs and absorb the alcohol. I always wonder what's next. What are they going to come up with next? Kratom I mentioned as having the opioid type of effects, and we're about done here. Put this on here because a friend of mine who's a medical toxicologist in Omaha called me and he said, "We're beating you. We're ahead of you. I'll bet you don't have any head shops there advertising Kratom on the radio." I said, "You know what? You're right." He goes, "We do. We beat you." And Kratom is from Thailand and Malaysia, and it hits the opioid receptors in the brain. Also has some stimulant and antidepressant effects, and so people actually sometimes will use it to get off opioids, but more often to abuse it, so that they'll get some of these stimulant/opioid type of effects. And you can't really grow it in our area of the world, but it's plenty of it is being imported, usually sold through either the internet or through shops. This is a website that I really highly recommend to keep up with drugs of abuse. It's called arrowid.org. Going back to talking about some of these places or meetings that I've been to, the website was originally founded by 4 people. They go by the names Earth, Wind, Fire, and Water Arrowid. For obvious reasons, they want to keep their identities secret. But it's essentially a drug advocacy website, but they try and do it in a very responsible way. If something's bad news, they'll come right out and tell you, this is bad news. So, for example, for some reason in Oklahoma, we have a problem with kids huffing dusters, like the computer dusters, as well as Freon. If you go on this website, they'll tell you, you're crazy if you do it. And people who do that are crazy, because people die right away from doing it. They just fall over dead, and you can't predict when it's going to happen. They keep up with new drugs. The most fascinating part of it is the trip reports. So you go in there and people will tell you, okay, I'm 22 years old, I weigh 140 pounds, I last ate 3 hours ago, and this is what I took. And they basically keep a journal throughout the entire thing. Good or bad, everything that happens. And it's terrifying, it's eye-opening, you get an insight into the mind of a drug abuser, and across the spectrum of all types of drugs. And they link back in a lot of cases to the medical and scientific literature. In fact, they've ripped stuff straight out of some of our references, illegally, but who's going to complain about that? They're willing to take on. Nobody's going to find them, essentially. Although, like I said, at one of our meetings, they showed up. 2 of them did. and they were in a small breakout room, probably twice the size of this room, and you had people from all over the world that were packed into that room. They were 10 deep at the back, just packed in. They said, "We're from this website called Arrowhead. Has anybody ever heard of us?" Every hand in the audience went up, and they were just shocked that we knew who they were, because it's that reliable of a website. So this is an example of the website. If you're looking for information on the drugs, the place you want to go is right here, Plants and Drugs. And that's kind of the portal into the front of it. They have probably 20 different types of drugs on the front. Don't let that kind of fool you. It's deep. There are a lot more kind of drugs behind that first page that you get to from there. Any kind of drug you want to know about, it's on that website. Mushrooms, just whatever you can think of. So take-home messages. Kids know about this stuff. People are always going to try and get high. We clamp down on one type of drug, people are going to search out and find another type of drug. It's part of the human condition. I've become convinced of that. People are going to try and get high, whether it's alcohol, a stimulant, a depressant, a hallucinogen. They're going to find a way to alter their consciousness.